This is Reich's basic thing of the basic antithesis, but also the idea of functional identity. We have the psyche and the soma, and as I said, what seems like two very, very different realities and systems. And on this level, they certainly are. They are different, we know that. I would also include emotions in this. This Reich doesn't put this there, but I do. But Reich says that, and if you're working psychosomatically, you're interested in the relationship between those two things. If you're working functionally, here's the difference. This is the energy system, could be a baby, could be a chemical reaction. Well, no, let's stay with babies. And as a result of the energetic functioning, you get the creation of both the psyche and the soma. They come from the same source. The orgone creates everything. And so it creates physical reality, and then it creates all the differentiated physical realities, including you and me. Reich says we're not interested in this relationship, we're interested in their relationship to here. Because if there is a problem, as Blasband indicated, or any other system where the child is living in a low-level fearful state, or maybe there's a low-level depression in the home, the child doesn't understand it. They can't process it cognitively, but they sense it and they react physically and emotionally. So what happens is this natural developmental process of the child is getting interfered with. Aggressive father, disinterested parents, and so on. You get a disturbance somewhere down here. Begins to go out of balance, I don't know exactly the right expression. Then that imbalance is transmitted up there. And we will see in the physical level, in the body, that imbalance, and we will see a reflection of that, well, psyche, and we will see a reflection of that in the soma. It'll look different, but as far as for my work anyway, working energetically, is to understand where do these two different symptoms come from? Well, they come from here. And then if we can help the person for them to reorganize themselves down here, the symptoms will disappear. I'll give you one example and then I stop. This is my favorite. Many years ago, when I first started seeing and understanding functioning, getting to a deeper level of what I understood from Reich, I did a 5-day workshop with a small group, and there was a young man there, and he was what I would call a schizoid. He was isolated, he was thin. He was a nice man, but he wasn't very personal or emotional, didn't make much contact with other people in the group. And I do a touch technique. I learned a similar style that Blasband did, but I do it different now. And it's a very quiet work, it's a very gentle work. It looks like shiatsu. So this man is lying on a mat, and I am working on his back very lightly, going along his spine, the rhomboids, the scapular spine, all of this musculature here. At the end of the session, how do you feel? Okay. Anything to say? Nothing. This goes on for 8 sessions, all week long. The last session, I'm working with him, and he starts crying very softly, and then he cries very deeply. And so at the end, I'm looking forward to my question, anything to talk about. And he said, I realized my stepmother loved me. I thought all those things she did to me was because she didn't love me. But now I see it was her way to say that she loved me. We never talked about her stepmother. I didn't know he had a stepmother. I knew there was some early disturbance. So the question is, how could he get this realization with no new information? He didn't get a letter from his father that explained something about the stepmother. There's no new information. While he's lying there, a guy from Austria with a guy from New York pushing on his back, and he reorganizes a primary relationship. We didn't work on this level. When you bring the energy down, what Emano mentioned, this term from my teacher I use, in-stroke, you come down here, and if this can get reorganized, then he will realize he was loved, and then his body will start changing, and it will start becoming more nourished. Because he was nourished, but he didn't accept the nourishment. My fantasy is because he shut down when his mother died. And no matter what the stepmother offered, he couldn't take it in. So to me, working energetically is not to work with the problems, but work with the part that is still whole and still knows how to organize itself in its way. Okay, thank you.
Bene, allora adesso introdurrò subito Lilly Davis. Lilly Davis è una psicoterapeuta corporea, da molti anni lavora professionalmente, mi sembra 35 anni, ha lavorato in diversi paesi europei, è stata anche una trainer di Charles Kelly. Charles Kelly è quello che ha fondato Redix, l'istituto Redix. Charles Kelly ha lavorato direttamente con Wilhelm Reich e appunto Lilly è stata una trainer in California e in Europa e ora è una trainer o formatrice per l'istituto di analisi funzionale. Lavora come terapeuta di clinica nel sud della Francia, insegna all'Università di Montpellier e è membra appunto dell'Istituto Europeo della Psicoterapia Corporea ed è anche membra della Federazione Francese degli Psicoterapeuti e degli Psicoanalisti. Ecco, pertanto Lilly Davis ci parlerà appunto delle applicazioni dei concetti energetici nel lavoro verbale. Un tema molto interessante, perché solitamente si fa terapia verbale, ma invece come si lavora energeticamente, verbalmente. Ok, ecco a voi Lilly Davis.
Okay, I will pick this up where Will left it. This is Reich's basic idea about the energy being unified, then coming up and splitting into psyche and soma. As he said, they are functionally identical, and this means they are not just interdependent, they are the same thing. They're the manifestation or a symptom of the same thing. Now, if this is true, then we can start working with these processes from a body perspective, from the somatic realm, honoring the connective tissue, like with Carla Steckel, or we can start working in the psychic realm. Yeah, I try to do this, and I will try to show you how. I'm used to walking around and holding things, so I will have to get used to
difficult
this.
For somebody who's not Italian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question which came up again was, how does that work, to work, verbal work with life energy? One, I think you need to have life energy concepts about development and healing. You need to be capable to evaluate energetic functioning or dysfunctioning. You could understand this as a translation of regular diagnostic terms like depression, anxiety, or anorexia into energetic processes. Yeah? The third point to me is that it's a shift from working from the body-mind split towards the body-mind or heart-brain connection. Essentially, to me, any therapy model that wants to enhance change needs an understanding of a dynamic. Dynamic in Greek means force at work, so we are with the life force at work. Otherwise, there's no life change possible. In the verbal work, the red thread represents this dynamic. The red thread is the essential piece of a fabric. It's one thread which, if you cut it, the whole piece will fall apart. Yeah? So I will go back and enumerate 4 principles with this from Reich's life energy, which I use in my everyday practice. I work with in a small country practice. I work a lot. I have all kinds of pathologies, if you want. I am part of a system which takes care of people which no longer can be taken care of a generalist and are not yet so disturbed that they have to be in a clinic. Yeah? A third of the people I work with are heavily disturbed and have needed at one point or still need medication administered by a psychiatrist. The other 2/3 don't. We are moving away from medical treatment. I work in a network of acupuncturists and homeopathic people. So I'm trying to bring these people into a life-oriented process, but sometimes it's not possible right away to do body work and to go into these deeper processes. First principle is Reich's pulsation. You have heard about it from Dick Blasband and from Will. Second is that the pulsation in time and space moves forward in a spinning wave. Third principle is that it accumulates. And the fourth principle is that it represents itself as functionally identical. This is what we had here. If we look at an organism, we will find pulsatory movement in and out, which we call from now on in-stroke and out-stroke. And we'll find many different pulsatory rhythms in our organism which are superimposed. Breathing, metabolism, sleep, wake cycle, menstruation, etc., etc. To be more specific, the inward movement could be associated or is associated with inspiration, the outstroke with the expiration, the instroke with the charging, the outstroke with discharging, the instroke with centering, the outstroke with expansion, instroke with gathering or condensation, the outstroke with dissipation or reverberation. On a cognitive level, you could talk about instroke as being concerned with comprehension, important for the verbal work. On the outstroke, you have expression. The inward movement is taking, the outward movement is giving, and the states you can get to is on the inward movement, you get to being states, while on the outward moving, you get into doing. I would even go further and say the work with the instroke enhances the self, while the outstroke enhances the I. This is important because classic psychotherapy and certainly classic Reichian body work was concentrating and trying to work the outstroke. So it was high charge work, looking for catharsis, for liberation of emotions, etc. We do exactly the opposite. We work consequently, stringent, all the time in advancing, fostering, enhancing the in-stroke. So the work model is completely different. As I said above, in time and space, the pulsation which in an organism you see as an in and outward movement is represented by the spinning wave. Yeah? It's a three-dimensional movement which goes up and forward, back on itself, but not quite right because it's in a third dimension, up and forward and along. The development is not linear. There's no linear lines in nature anyway. Development is always in that third dimension. In nature, and an example for this movement is a flock of birds during migration. You know, when they sit down, it's quite impressive. They sit down, they're all quiet, then they move up and out and come back to themselves, and up and out and back to themselves. In human life, we experience cycles of more inward movement or inward emphasis, or cycles of more outward movement or outstroke emphasis. This is a model for development. One of these cycles is the baby. Here you can see these big round things. This is the loop, the inward movement. The baby sleeps a lot, eats a lot, is turned towards itself a lot. And here we get the opposite, the mama, which is not sleeping a lot and not eating a lot and not turned to itself. She's, there for the child and in an outstroke emphasis. If we look at this spinning wave a little closer, we will see that, or we can define what happens during one of these loops. It starts on the bottom with a certain desire. In French, you would say envie, which means in life. In English, I think in Italian, it's desiderio, no? Desire, okay.
Desiderio.
So it's a certain excitement which starts the movement forwards. It moves up, forward, expands, maybe discharges, and then it turns back on itself. There's a little relaxation, maybe a little tiredness. There's a gathering, a centering, a process of integration, of calm, before another cycle can start. This movement shows that the relaxation, the gathering, the centering, the integration process happens during the in-stroke. So if we want to enhance the self-to-self relationship, if we want to help a person to be themselves, we need to stress this inward movement. This is a little diagram I use when I work with patients. I show it to them because it shows that if you have an outstroke constantly trying to be forward and out without this feedback loop coming back on yourself, if you move forward without reflection, this leads to dysfunction, burnout, and depression. You can see that it goes up, the first movement goes up. The person could be a little tired, in difficulty, maybe wanting to relax, but if he cannot for outward reasons or inward reasons, he will start accelerating, trying to push himself further. He will get up to a certain peak, but then he will be exhausted, he collapses. When he's collapsed, it's not a comfortable moment, a feedback loop of integration, rest, and oh, how well did I do this? It's not comfortable at all. It is he's exhausted, he's tired, he's not capable to have contact anymore, he's below, he's in a minus state, he has nothing to do. So most people at that moment only want to get back up. So what they do is, they, in French you say, tire sur la corde, they make another effort and get back up again. This time the peak will be less high, they will fall down, collapse again, a little longer, and so on, until the time down, or the downtime, will be longer and longer and turn into depression. With this, as soon as there's existence, there is consciousness. Hermano talked about it and Will talked about it. As soon there's a pulsatory movement of orgone energy within a membrane, it produces consciousness. Verbal work wants to enhance consciousness. We're talking about subjective consciousness here. The third principle is that life energy accumulates and creates structure and functioning. Soma and psyche are manifestations, symptoms of life energy. We talked about this before. I don't have to spend too much time with this. Nevertheless, here's a little diagram of it. Yeah? If you look at that circle, which represents like a cell, and you imagine that you have an outstroke emphasis, the charge will accumulate on the outside, on the periphery, and create over time a certain imbalance. The form of the organism and his information will be like that red thread down there, dissipative, enlarged, maybe expansive, but under any circumstances it will be much wider than what you find on the other side. The other side shows an in-stroke emphasis, which leads to a concentration or an accumulation of charge in the center, which creates a dysfunctioning and imbalance on the other side. There's too much condensation, there's contraction, and the red thread, the mental representations, the thoughts, everything will be much more contracted. The same is here. Psyche and soma are the same thing essentially. Now, if we take these two pieces here and we dress them up, the cells, we give them a head and we give them some arms and legs, then you get this, yeah? This is an outstroke-oriented person. Yeah, he's puffed up, blown up, maybe expansive, but what you do see is the center is undercharged, so there is little self-contact, self-to-self relationship, and the same, which is represented by that blue blase, I don't know how you say that, blue ball, is the thinking process. It's blown up, it's puffed up, it might be out of contact with his internal states. And here we got the opposite, we got the in-stroke man. Yeah, he is contracted, the contraction is towards the center, it is around the center, the movement is up, articulation is held on the way in, breath is held on the way in, the hair is held on the way in, and so is his thinking process, the mental representations, the verbiage. This might be somebody who gives very little information, who talks little, or might be even very silent. So, functional identity is the fourth Reichian principle of psyche and soma. Reich said the concept of functional identity means that muscular and character attitudes serve the same function as the psychic apparatus. They can influence and replace each other. They cannot be separated. In their function, they are identical. So as I said before, if we can start working with the soma, we should be able to work with the psychic process in the verbal work. This is clear. Now we could say that the energetic matrix represents itself as a somatic and psychic web, like a connecting tissue, which is charged or undercharged, and held together in a specific pattern. And I would like to add here, these patterns are fractal patterns. This is important for us. Fractal systems are living systems. They have a specific capacity of growth. They can grow infinitively. They can grow and evolve infinity. This is why it's important for us. They are very good in internal and external communication and networking. They are organized between chaos and order, robust and well-growing. They are what you call self-similar structures. I think the best example is the Christmas tree, yeah? Everybody knows the Christmas tree. Christmas tree, the self-similarity of the Christmas tree is this, yeah? We have the stem and a branch. And then on the branch you have a little needle, or another little branch, and a stem. And it's always the same pattern, this and this, and this and this. And every child knows how to make a Christmas tree. These are other images of crystals, snow crystals, flowers, other images of fractal systems, which certainly most of you know in nature. Now, in the human body, neurons, as you see in that skeleton, the respiratory system, the circulatory system, and the brain are organized also this way. There is an interesting study from Kitzbichler and Alteras which prove that brain exhibits fractal behavior. They say on a smaller or larger scale, we see biological, psychological, and social dynamics are interlinked. This fractal broadband connectivity we share with the rest of the natural world. Now we come back to our two people, yeah? And you can see very clearly the principle which governs the outstroke person, yeah, is his functional identity, where the principle which governs the in-stroke person, or for example an anorectic person, yeah, is the same principle. One is expansion beyond the limits, the other one is contraction and staying within the limits. So functional identity, which was Reich's terms, is today you can talk about a fractal pattern or self-similarity, which is an important term in terms of the dynamic. So we could say the human being is an autopoietic, self-referential and self-organizing system. It is organized like all fractal systems. The organism of that body-mind unit is a temporal optimal structuralization, and it can organize and reorganize within the pulsatory dynamic of the life force. We use the inward movement of the pulsation in order to induce change. This is important because the following aspect. If you change in a fractal system one function, all themes, all manifestations, and all symptoms of this one function will change. You get like a domino effect, yeah? It's very important because it doesn't mean you have to work on every problem and every notion the person has, not on every self-concept or on every physical arm or leg. If you change one function, if you can change the inward movement or enhance a stronger inward movement, you get a domino effect and a stronger inward movement in all aspects. This is the difference in functional analysis and regular psychotherapeutic verbal work. Yeah? You can use the body as a fractal system and use this function these systems have. So basically, as I said before, we're working with the in-stroke, which means we move inward, working with what is including the defense system. We work for integration instead of further mobilization, using self-healing forces. In the verbal work, you can find many concepts like enhancing inspiration, insight, acceptance, acknowledgement, identification, concentration, coordination, and so on, incorporation, reflection. And you can already see with your Latin background that everything which starts with the word in, co, together, or re, or ad, ac, yeah, has to do with bringing things in. Yeah? So basically, we want to move towards this self-to-self relationship. What do we do? Concrete, I do the same as I did when I did the body work. Somebody comes in, I look at how is the body, how is the charge, how is the posture, is there movement, what kind of movement can we find? I look at how is the contact, is there contact or is there no contact? Yeah? I look at how is the relationship between the content and the contact to themselves. Is what they're talking about represented in their body language? Or is it an intellectualized, cold narrative which has nothing to do with their life experience right now? I look at the emotions. Are there emotions, feelings, or none? We know that fear, for example, is an in-stroke process. Trust is an in-stroke process. So according to where they are and how they feel, I can diagnose much better where are they in their pulsatory process and where do they need or want to go. And then, of course, we look at the problem, the content, the context. I listen to the story. What is the problem? But again, it's not so much the content itself, it's more the relationship they have with the content. How are they with their problem? Many people ask, is it me or is it them? Yeah? Are they caught completely inundated in their conflict, or are they still present and interested in themselves and how did they get into this problem, or how do they get out of this problem? Interest is the first thing I'm looking for. I'm trying to get a person who is depressed interested in themselves. I'm trying to get a person who is anxious, to give them a perspective so that they can look at themselves and understand, how did I get here? Is this my beautiful life? Is this who I wanted to be? Yeah? How did this happen to me? Because interest and curiosity is, on the cognitive level, the first excitement which will move towards an inward loop. Yeah? So it will start a development of interest which will bring the person into contact with themselves and into a deeper process of wanting to understand and change. It looks often like this, you know, the problem is a piece of a puzzle and then over time we fill it out and then it's not such a riddle anymore. And then I look at the verbal body. Yeah, I live and work in 3 languages. I think I'm very interested in words. I think words say exactly what they are, and to me, patients tell you exactly how they are, what they feel, what their problem is. It's much more our problem to not want to interpretate, to change, to look at it as a problem. No, if you listen correctly, people tell you exactly where they are. So the verbal body can be fast or slow, it can be exuberant, sparse, there can be silence, or there's no space at all, it's all filled and they're talking to you so that you cannot say a simple word, or so that certainly there's no moment of silence. Question now is, where's the red thread? First, what we do is we create an in-stroke field. The therapist goes on the in-stroke in order to calm himself. He doesn't know anything. Yeah, he's just there in order to receive. The client in that field has a better perspective to concentrate on himself, to not be other or therapist-oriented, to listen to himself and to develop his own theme and find his red thread. So basically, we work, again, this is nothing new, but if you do it consequently, stringently, and only, you will find very different outcome. We work with centering. I use a lot of silence. I think you need empathy with the patient and with yourself. Interest, active listening and paraphrasing in order to clarify and to be sure that you really understand. feeding back within the contact and the context, within that body-mind correlation. And then I work with reflection. I will say a little bit more about reflection in a moment. Reflection to me is not a simple mental representation. It's not a simple thought. Reflection is the capacity to look at yourself and feel yourself at the same time. Yeah, when you're looking to describe how you are or how people are, often they go like, this is not quite right, and they can change it a little bit. Now when they think, this is right, in French you say, c'est juste, ça c'est moi, this is me, this is my truth. And this congruence feels good. It doesn't matter whether the feeling itself is anxiety or a little bit inquieting. The state of being congruent, of being true to yourself, is calming, is life-oriented, it's positive, it's good, and in French you say, ça importe, it is more important than the feeling itself. Yeah? So reflection is, in German you would say, eine Überlegung. One of the translators speaks German. If you translate that word, Überlegung, into English, it is a superimposition. Superimposition was one of the most important Reichian concepts. Yeah? So reflection creates consciousness, subjective consciousness. Okay, so I said congruence feels good? Yes, congruence feels good. And it doesn't only feel good in the body, it feels good in the brain. Yeah? The brain relaxes, the brain is not contracted, the brain relaxes and feels good when you find your congruence. This is two very important people in recent neuro research, Solms and Panksepp. They wrote a book, The Feeling Brain. I will come back to that later. I think this is one of the most advanced material we have in neuroanalytic, neuropsychoanalytic, and neurophysicist work. Now let's make a little excursus about language. Yeah? Most psychologists see an unbridgeable divide between the pre-verbal and the verbal. Yeah? A lot of argument is we need to do body work because this is the pre-verbal state and we cannot have access to these states because the child learned only to connect neurological and to govern syntax and other things much later, so language is useless if you want to get to a deeper process. I disagree, and I found Löwald, it's a psychoanalyst, relational psychoanalyst. Will made a reference to him before. He suggests that language is put as embodying and creating different forms of psychic life. Löwald says the mother speaks with or to the infant, not with the expectation that he will grasp the words, but he is immersed, embedded in a flow of speech that is part and parcel of a global experience within the mother-child dyad. While the mother utters the words, the infant is bathed in sound and rhythm as accentuating ingredients of a global, dense, and undifferentiated experience. I like this. I think this is exactly what it is. I think language is not just syntax. If you look at the words, we will do some more later. Yeah, it's a song. Yeah. Children, there's research where you tell children a story while they are still in the womb, and that these children will later like this story particularly much, or play music while they are still in utero, and they will recognize in a certain way, that they know this, they're familiar with it, and they like it particularly. Same thing is with a little older children. I don't know about you, but I know that I had a secret language which I could only speak with my closest friends. So sound and language is not just mental representation, cold, intellectualized narrative. Words, in my understanding, are a creation between lalation. I didn't know that that was a word, but it is. As in the onomatopoeias, like cuckoo, drizzle, sizzle, dumb, babble, fuzzy, dizzy, or even the Big Bang. Yeah? These are onomatopoeias, these are word creations, and they speak by their own life. They are built and building an experience. They're not just semantic rules and regulations, abstracts of all sense of life. And then you can see that in cultural contexts we have completely different words. The French have a word which is called se fenestrer. It is suicide by throwing oneself out of the window. I don't know whether you Italians have this word, but the Germans don't. It's not to be found in the dictionary. Yeah? In France, it is found in the dictionary and it's a used word.
Defenestrarsi, defenestrarsi.
Huh? The Japanese have about 90 words for I, according to the circumstances in which they will use that word, in terms of the relationship, who they will meet, who they will talk to. Yeah? And while they have no word for eye contact, even though they see everything, they use the English word, which is eye contacto. So words are living things. Words are rhizome. You know what that is? That's the same thing. These are fractal, like plants are rhizomes. Yeah? They are fractal structures, again, which create and self-create and grow. I will tell you about another word which I think is really interesting. The English word belonging, to belong to. In French it is called appartenance, which is exactly what it is. You are apart, you are separate, and tenance, you still hold on to the other. Yeah, you're not in fusion or in confusion. No, you are in appartenance. The Germans, the same word belonging in German comes from the root to listen to obey. Yeah? Zugehörigkeit. It means something like to listen to. And in English, it is just simply the good old grammatical form they always use, the gerund, yeah? Belonging, which couldn't be said better, yeah? The people you would like to belong to, you are belonging them. This is just to show you how words are creations, they are sense carriers, they are expressions or impressions of what we live on a much deeper level. Then of course you have psychosomatic vocabulary, like when you talk about you're sad and you have a heavy heart, or you're heartbroken, or in other matters people may be pissed off or knocked off their socks when they realize. So altogether I think words are creations, they're songs, they're sound, they're music, resonance, or reverberations of consciousness. In some of the Oriental techniques, for example in Chinese medicine, in the Qigong you have teachings which use sounds for healing organs. Yeah, I think you also have them in Indian teachings, different sounds for chakras. It is interesting because the sound which helps the liver is shh. Okay. So, the verbal work needs to be self-centered, self-referential. Basically what we do, we put experience, insight, feelings, emotions together. We connect, and therefore we could even call it functional synthesis. The work needs to happen in the present moment field of intersubjectivity in order to be resonant. Yeah? In French you say it creates éclairage. It's not quite enlightenment, but we would say all the lights are on. It creates responsibility. A lot of people suffer from culpabilité, from guilt feelings, and very often they cannot even define them quite clearly. Yeah? But to be responsibility, to have the capacity to listen to yourself and then to answer just that, what you hear within yourself, creates just that capacity to be responsible. We create a self-to-self relationship which generates the platform of the relationship with all others. Recognition. What has been said can be heard not only by others but also by oneself. So the connection of psyche and soma creates subjective consciousness. Consciousness is an enormous theme, and in the 50 minutes or the 60 minutes I can talk about it, I'm certainly not capable to develop it. But I would like to redefine what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the interconnectivity between psyche and soma. Will was using it down there where the two of them meet. Yeah, I think they can also meet up here. It's like with trees. They need roots in order to get water, but they also need leaves in order to get the sun. Yeah? So, I will read this, I think because this is very well written. In the case of the body-mind problem, observation is reflexive. The subject, me, is looking at myself mainly as an object. This is what happens most of the time. People look in the mirror and they go, oh, this is me. Or they look at their body and they say, this is me, or oh my God, this is me. Yeah? But what we really want, we want ourselves as subject. Yeah? So subjective consciousness arises from being the portion of reality that generates consciousness. The relationship between seeing that portion of reality and simultaneously feeling it is not a causal relationship. They are two manifestations of the same thing. Here we are, and one more time, Reich's early findings are affirmed. Yeah? If you want to know further, more about this, it might be interesting for some of the people who are interested in neuro work. Yeah, these guys saying that the neural correlates of consciousness are located in the upper brain stem, not in the neocortex. Yeah? So the connection between neocortex and brain stem is what will create relationship on this deeper level between psyche and soma. The brain stem is the place, is in tight connection with those structures that monitor the state of the visceral body. Yeah? So again, psyche and soma need to be coherent in order for us to feel well. So consciousness is seeing and feeling ourselves at the same time. It is being connected in psyche and soma at the same time. This is the restoration of a pulsatory process. The in-stroke stimulates reflection as energetic process. Again, this is not an intellectualization of the narrative. It is a creative process in the here and now. Reflection grounds itself within the somatic realm. consciousness, subjective consciousness, is created. So in a very simple and creative way, the self comes to mind. Last not least, I want to say that for me it's very important that this work stands in the changing of the epitheme which has been governing the modern world. It's the epitheme of domination. I think we need to work towards an epitheme of interconnectivity, mutuality, metabolism. The dominative separation and subject and object, the dichotomies of man's mind over nature, of mind over body, male over female, and so forth, I think they come to be proven illusory, and there's a necessity of thinking in terms of non-linear, dynamically complex systems which are proving themselves to us today. So when we think and feel at the same time and gain subjective consciousness of the mind-body connection, the heart and the brain, it allows us not just to feel pleasure or joy, but also a deep gratitude towards life. Thank you.